Hey guys, welcome back. So today we're going to do something actually productive, and we are going to tint some Alclad. I get this question all the time. How do you tint Alclad? So we're taking these metals that I did here. The metals are made by my friend Todd. He needed them painted, so he needed silver and gold. So I've done silver versions and done some gold versions, and they're all done with Alclad, and they're just tinted. So I took a bunch, made all of them like this, and then I tinted some to look like this. And we're going to go over the steps right now on how I did this. So let's get to it. So today I am in the process of painting a bunch of metals for the LA whip competition. And I'm doing the silver and the gold versions of these things. So I've got a whole bunch just off camera here. And I have already painted them silver, which I did with Alclad. Just time, expense, controllability, etc. And I'm going to be doing gold versions, and I always get asked how to tint them. So if you're curious about how I got this metal look, this was done the same way that I did the Stormtrooper helmets a few months ago. I can link to that at the end of this video, and you can see it's pretty reflective. Now it's not a perfect mirror because this is a hand sculpted thing, so it's got some surface texture on it that kind of changes the reflective properties a little bit. But I'm gonna go over how I tint these and some of the steps. So anyway, got a silver thing here, helicopter's flying over. So I'm gonna grab one that's already silver here. We can look at the difference. So there's this one has been sprayed with Alclad, and this one has been sort of polished. So this one's had a step done already. This one is just straight Alclad. So what I do is I take the ones that have been sprayed but not polished. I get like an old t-shirt here, and see if I can get this on camera, but I will basically just polish the surface and knock off any like little subtle surface texture, and you can see the reflectivity gets much better. Now this is a really important step before doing the gold layers, is you want to definitely polish the Alclad. And I'm giving it some decent pressure. You can see the Alclad is pretty sturdy. It's staying on well. I'm pushing down pretty hard, and the reflectivity now is improved greatly just by hitting the surface. Now this is not a fix. If you have a bad finish underneath, this will not fix it. This is just basically taking down there's like almost like a dust layer that comes down with the Alclad, like the last little bits of it settle. The tiny metal flakes on the surface are like laying at weird angles. So when you brush it down, you either remove any loose flakes that are at the wrong angles, or you flatten them down, and then all the reflections unify, and then it makes it look a lot shinier, which is why, I mean, you can see it's pretty shiny there. That's just a quick little buff with the t-shirt. You definitely want to do this before you do the gold, because if you have those surface imperfections and those little surface flakes that aren't polished, as soon as you seal this the way that I'm about to do this, you can't change that. It will not get any shinier. So if you want it to be as reflective as possible, this is what you got to do. Now Alclad always loses a little bit of reflectivity when you clear coat it or tint it a little bit, but this is one of the steps to ensure that you get the most kind of like bang for the buck reflective properties with the Alclad. So I'm reflecting some red stuff in the background so you can actually see what's going on. My whole tint is white, so it makes it hard to see, but if I point it down, you can see it's pretty reflective. Looks good. So anyway, let's get to the next step here. I want to get reset up. All right, so I have gone now and polished all these metals. You can see they look nice and shiny. You can see my reflections in there. I put a piece of cardboard behind here because the white background was making my camera go crazy contrast-wise. But now you can see this better. They're nice and reflective, silver. And we want to make them gold. But I used the gold tint in a 2K auto clear coat, kind of like what I'm doing to paint the bases. But you cannot spray the 2K auto clear coat directly on the Alclad. There's something with the carrier agent, the solvent in the 2K clear coat, that affects the Alclad negatively. So it starts to lift up the little flakes of metal and it loses its reflectivity. So what we need to do is put a barrier layer down. We're going to use basically like a water-based kind of barrier. So these are the typical things I use. Today we're going to use the aqua gloss just because I happen to have it. The aqua gloss I think sprays just a tiny bit better, but the Liquitex Professional High Gloss Varnish, the gloss varnish works, but the high gloss works better. These work almost identically in the process. They look the same when they're done. I could do 20 pieces and mix and match, and I wouldn't be able to tell you which one I did which way. I feel like this one sprays just a little bit better, a little bit, barely noticeable. So if you get a good deal on this, I would just get the Liquitex. And again, putting this down, not going to use that today. Basically, I'm going to spray this through the same spray gun that I sprayed my Alclad through, which is a cheap Harbor Freight spray gun. I just open up the spray valve a little bit so it sprays a little more material. We'll spray some here so we can see it. My gun is beat to death. So the gun itself works great, but the cup is cracked, so I just barely put any in here. Make sure it's nice and nothing's in there. You want to turn the pressure down a little bit. You want to spray too hard. And I'm going to close the valve a bit so that the spray that comes out isn't super powerful. You don't want it to drench these. You want to do a few light passes and dust them so that the surface gets a little light coating. And then once that dries just a little bit, we'll go back and spray a little more, because these are, both of this and the Liquitex are very low viscosity and have a tendency to drip very easily if you spray too much. So we need to do a light coats, and once they're coated, then we'll go from there. So I'll do a couple here and then we'll come back when it's time for the next step. So I'm going to put on a dust mask. It's not so important with this stuff to use like a full-on like 3M respirator, which I will use when I do the 2K. This is just to keep the little bit of particles out of my face. This should work just fine. So again, aqua gloss. Crack this open, see if the bottle's all right. Of course, got this seal on here that always likes to stick. Now, I'm just going to put a tiny bit in here. You don't need a lot. And if I need more, I just refill it. So, let me see. Turn the pressure down. I don't know exactly what the pressure is. It's probably like less than 20 psi. And close the nozzle so that there's just barely any coming out. I don't know if you can see that. This is a very light mist. I'm actually turn this down a little more so these don't swing. And I'm going to put on some gloves, because if I have to manipulate these at all, I really don't want to touch these with my bare hands until they're totally done. In general, like when you're working with Alclad, when you do the base coat, you don't want to touch the surface with your greasy hands, because it makes the Alclad not stick in those areas very well. So I keep gloves on until the Alclad is applied. Even if you're just doing silver with no top coat, I think that once the Alclad is applied and polished, then you can handle it with your bare hands without much problem. So, all right, here we go. And basically just mist these. And what happens is you can see the reflectivity kind of go away. It gets like cloudy. And that's what we want. We want to like go from nice and reflective, like we made it nice and shiny. And then we want to basically just dust them enough to make it not reflective. And it doesn't take very much. So I don't know if you can see the difference in reflectivity on the ones that I've sprayed here. So I don't know if we can do this. Compare this one, it's all like not shiny now, compared to say this one, which is really reflective. You see the difference. So that's what we're going for. We're going to do this one dust coat, and we'll go back and spray a little bit more, but I'm just going to go ahead and finish them and then do the backs, and then I'll come back once they're done and we'll go on to the next step. Alright, so they've all been sprayed and look really hazy. They actually look more reflective in camera than they do in person. Like right now they look hazy, and this is basically like a quick first coat. What I'll do is I'm going to start back at the end that I already started with, and you can see that it's a little bit deadened. The reflections are not nearly as good. Again, this looks better in camera than it does in person. So what I do is I go back over with the second coat, and the second coat is a little thicker and it helps to clear it up just a little bit. I don't know if I'll be able to get this in camera or not. It basically just wets out the surface a tiny bit and brings back a little bit of reflectivity. You can see there. Again, this is not nearly as reflective as it was before I started spraying it, but you can see that it's starting to come back a little bit. Basically, I go over all these again, do another pass like this, and then I let that dry. Then we move on to the tint stage in the 2K auto step. So, yeah, one last coat, and we'll be back soon. Okay, so these are all now coated with the aqua gloss. I've done the dust coat and then kind of like 2 overall coats to even them out. And as they dry, they actually clear up a little more. And in camera, they actually still look really reflective. Again, in person, they're not nearly as reflective as they would be uncoated. But that will clear up some more when we do the 2K step. Now, what causes the lack of reflectivity isn't so much the quality of the clarity of the aqua gloss, but it's the surface. On the surface, even when you spray this stuff really smooth, there's these tiny, virtually microscopic imperfections in the surface, and they bounce the light in all kinds of different directions. So the light that's coming in that you want to reflect back in a very sharp angle is now being diffused a little bit, and that's why the reflectivity goes down. Again, look, these look great in camera. So if you're making a costume to be photographed, this right here without the 2K coat, this is a good way to seal a silver Alclad coat. Again, it does not look nearly as reflective in person as it does in camera, but you can see in camera, looks great. But anyway, back to the thing. When the light's coming in and reflects off, those little surface imperfections diffuse that a little bit, and it kills the reflectivity. But once we put the 2K auto clear coat over this, it will level all that out, and the auto clear coat goes on very, very smooth, and it cures very smooth. So the surface is always like glass smooth if you do it properly. So that should bring back a level of reflectivity when we do the tint coat. So, and if it doesn't, I'll show you a trick when we get to it, or at least explain it if I don't have to do it. So anyway, this is the first major step after the Alclad. Coat them aqua gloss clear coat or Liquitex high gloss varnish. Either one of these is going to work just fine. Let them dry really well. This has to be really, really dry. Like, it'll feel dry and look dry. Give it a few hours at least. I try to give it 6 if possible, so I might not get back to the tinting coat until the morning. I'm not sure. We'll wait in a few hours and see. But yeah, here we go. Okay, so it is the next day, and we're gonna get ready to tint these a gold color. Now, typically when I'm tinting stuff gold, especially if I'm doing spray chrome, my tint color that I like to use is this SEM Candy Concentrate California Gold. This is the one that I use for almost everything. So all my 3PO parts, everything are colored with this. I have found that with Alclad, if I'm tinting Alclad, this tends to make it look a little bit more brassy. So today I'm going to try something a little bit different, which is the Berman Industries translucent dye. And this is amber. It's a similar color, but it's slightly more yellow. So I'm going to go with this today and just give it a test and see if I think it looks good. It's going to work fine. And it'll be a good test on the Alclad to see if this project is good for that. I was going to show you guys a sample. I did a video on this a while back. If you want to test a color before you apply it, a really good way to do that is to take a little sample of your tint and put it on a piece of clear plastic and hold it over the piece you're about to paint. And I actually had a piece here, but I think I brought it inside. Let me see, for example's sake, if I have it around. Let me go see if it's inside. I'll go grab it if I do. So essentially it'd be like this. I just get a little piece of clear plastic like this, semi-translucent stuff. I'm gonna take a little bit of my tint, just a drop of it's all I really need here. Now I'm gonna like plunge it. I'm just gonna put a drop. I'm gonna wipe it onto my semi-translucent plastic here, just so I can get a taste of the color. The clearer the plastic, the better. So now I've got some color on here. And then you can hold it up to see kind of like what it's gonna look like on your silver. There's a squirrels fighting behind me. It's a little bit more of a yellow color. I think it's going to work well. Because these are already clear coated with the aqua gloss, this step with the tint, I'm going to be using a catalyzed clear coat, like an automotive clear coat. So it's a 2-part mix. This one's a 2-to-1 mix. I've used 1-to-4. I've used all different brands. They all kind of work the same. I just literally go and look for like what's on sale. Because I'm not painting a car that's going to sit out in the sun all the time, it doesn't seem to matter as much. If I was painting on an automobile and it's outside, in and out all day long, I'd probably get a more expensive paint. But on props, all the clear coat I've used, like my 3PO I painted years and years ago. It's been abused like crazy, and I used the cheapest stuff I could find, and it's still holding up just fine. So keep that in mind. So anyway, I'm going to mix this stuff. I'm going to use these little mixing cups because I don't need a lot, and I'm spraying through just basically a cheap Harbor Freight spray gun, which I need to make sure I don't have any acetone left in here from cleaning it out. There's a little bit. Clear that out. So this is like a beat up old Harbor Freight gun. This thing, not very expensive and works great for this. So before we do any of this, for this type of paint, you definitely want a proper respirator. I'm gonna put this on, so I might be hard to understand here for a minute, but I'm gonna mix my paints. Now I do these small batches because it doesn't need a ton. So I'm gonna go to 40. So now we got the hardener. I'm gonna go up to a little over 60 because I kind of overdid the first batch. So there we go. We got our hardener. And then for the tint, I'm just going to use a little squirt here. I'm not going to do a lot. That's more than enough. One little squirt. There we go. I find that a little bit less tint is better with the Alclad, whereas with the actual spray chrome, a little more tint seems to be fine because it's so reflective. So I don't know if I can get this in the camera. See what it looks like here. It's got a nice yellowy amber color. Get it stirred up. And now we've got our spray gun. Just going to pour this in the top here. Put our cap on. Now we're going to do the same thing, and we're going to dust these. Basically a dust coat. And then we're going to let that set for a few minutes, and then we're going to come back and then do a wet coat. So let me get this. I usually do the pressure a little bit higher. And I'm a little ways back. Alright, now we're going to let that sit for probably like 5 minutes. And 5 to 10 minutes is good. And I just leave the other stuff in the gun for a little bit. And that will let that set just enough so that when you spray a wet coat, it hangs on the surface nicely and doesn't drip. So we're going to let that sit and settle, and then I'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, they've been here for about 10 minutes. I've already actually sprayed the backside with the gold to see, and I think the color works pretty well. So I'm going to go back over and we're going to wet out the surface on the front. You should see an increase in the reflectivity as I do this. So I'm coming in here. This one I kind of spattered a tiny little bit, but we should be able to even it out. And you can see it's kind of going toward gold.
and the reflectivity is increased a lot. Let me see if I can get the light on it. So you can see the reflectivity is kind of coming back after applying the clear coat. The 2K clear coat really makes the reflectivity improve dramatically. So basically, there we go. We got our first sort of gold one. We could go darker if we want, but I think this doesn't look too bad. I might go one more coat in a second. But I kind of like the color of this, actually. It's pretty good. But yeah, you can see the improvement in reflectivity. This also works with just silver. So if you're making him silver, instead of applying a tinted clear coat, apply just a regular clear coat, and it'll bring back a lot of the reflectivity. It won't come back to 100%, but it'll come back a lot with the Alclad. So if you want reflective Alclad that's protected, same process, just no tint. So let me see if I can get this on camera. But there we go, we got some reflectivity. It's pretty nice. Now, a thing that's going to help check your colors is having something white to reflect against. Let me see. So like if I put this up here, I have a white room, and I can see what color the gold is. Alright, so the bottoms are all done. We got a bunch of gold medals. I've got like probably 3 of them here where I kind of maybe went a little bit heavy, but otherwise they're pretty good. You can see the gold is pretty cool looking. And we'll take a look once he's dry and compare them to the silver ones. You can see the untreated versus the tinted, and have a nice look. So, do a quick check here. That looks pretty good. So what I do with the leftover paint that I've got is I take anything I've got 3D printed that I'm working on, and I just spray it on there, because this paint dries really hard. So if I just need a little filler, I just spray it on an in progress print piece, and it just helps out later. Then when I come back to this, there'll be another layer of like super hard, nice paint to sand off and get my finish good. So back to work. Okay, so here is,
oof, I just took my mask off and it is still smelling strong in here. This is the level of reflectivity that is still maintained after the clear coat. On this is just Alclad. I think it still looks pretty freaking good. And I'll compare them again with the silver when I get done. These are still very wet. I want to give you an example of a couple I oversprayed. So this one, it's kind of hard to see. Barely shows up in camera. In person, you can see like some of these little edges. I got a little bit too much paint. This one is an example too. You can see like right under the whip here, and then right along that line, there's a little too much yellow. It just is kind of like the paint slouching a little bit. There's probably, looks like maybe 3 of them that I kind of went a little heavy on. Not too bad. They're passable. And I'm doing this project pro bono, so these are, in the past, had just been spray painted, so this is about 1,000 times better than a spray paint. So if I forgot to mention in the video, all the steps that I did to do this gold tinted one can be done on a regular silver Alclad piece. If you want to protect it, you want to protect it for some reason. I feel like the Alclad usually holds up really well on its own. I haven't had much problem with it. But if you do want to coat it and put a layer of protection, you can do the exact same thing I did here and just leave out the tint step, and it will, exact same process, and you can tint them, and it'll be You can see it kills reflectivity just a little bit, but it still looks really good. Like I have some red stuff back here I can reflect, so that's why I keep moving them around so you can see that they're pretty reflective. And there's a lot of like surface like kind of imperfection on here, which is part of the sculpture. It's not part of the paint. So yeah, that's those little distortions and so forth are from the actual sculpture. But you can see it's nice and shiny, and really, really handy method. But anyway, hopefully this was helpful to you guys. Let me know if you got any more questions about this, and I'll see you guys soon. Thanks for stopping by. Later.